So when we're thinking about connectivity and integration in this whole new space, talk about the evolution, even since in the last 10 years, and the role that you're seeing Kubernetes-based architectures around integration connectivity play, and how we should think about them coexisting with legacy integration architectures and things.
Yeah. The word integration is such a high level word that it can mean so many different things, right? So let's talk about the type of integration we're talking about and the type of connectivity we're talking about. The one that I care about most is where we're talking about effectively how to make remote procedure calls, like to make it the simplest thing to say. You have two different processes that need to communicate as if, this is like one of the oldest problems in distributed computing. You want to make it look like they're local, but they're not. Okay. And so there've been XDR, RPC, Corba. We talked about the history of this, web services and WSDL, REST APIs, gRPC now, right? There is these different stacks. On a containerized infrastructure, this problem becomes even harder because now you have a hyper dynamic environment where the number of processes, the instance of processes are elastic and just go up and down, and you don't know where to find them. And then you have to interact with other services that are outside of that cluster. That's not hyper dynamic. How do you do that? And then how do you make sure that any one of these, by the way, microservices, which again is a super vague word. What is a microservice? But let's take it as you basically just decreasing the problem space that any given process solves, right, to smallest possible problem space. That means a lot more remote procedure calls, right? Okay, so now you have so much more procedure calls in a highly dynamic environment that's hyper elastic. Any one of these procedure calls failing or making the other service go down because there's too many coming on top of it, is going to cause the whole stack to fail. So the question of connectivity to me comes down to how do you make sure that you're not building everything on a house of cards, because the whole notion of digital transformation will fail if all of these processes aren't able to communicate with each other in a reliable way. That's what the question of connectivity is to me.
That's so well put. Like, 7-10 years ago, there was a concept of there's an API gateway at the edge that is going to be fueling your omni-channel initiative, mobile, whatever. And then, you'd have your service bus to kind of orchestrate, modernize maybe some legacy mainframes and build some SOAP services and maybe even some new RESTful services. So now what you're talking about is this whole plethora of little spiders in this web that all need to be talking to each other, and neither of those solve that problem.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And you can't have them all go through sort of heavy ESP in the middle. Like that just doesn't work anymore. You've got thousands of these services that need to talk to each other dynamically, right? Where are you going to put that ESP on? Kubernetes? And who's going to manage it, right? So that's the challenge. Yeah.
That's going to take a while for that problem to be defined, in my opinion. Are you seeing customers come to you and say, hey, we need to figure out this spider web, the spiders in the spider web problem? It's even hard to verbalize that. It's like, I guess, how do you take the cart before the horse and proactively go to a CIO and actually explain to them, this is the problem you're about to see happen? Because I'm telling you, like, all my CIO friends out there are not thinking of this spider web right now. They're not thinking of this. They're still at, okay, I've got an API gateway and I've got my bus. They are not in this land. How do you begin to communicate about that?
Yeah. I think it comes down to going and understanding again, like that's what always gravitate to the end-to-end use cases and the user needs, right? That's what we do. And what's funny is that, yes, at this, a lot of the CIOs are still thinking that top down, but I would say a lot of them now, as you go into the use cases, they're realizing, look, this is just not going to work, right? This model that we have. And what happens is that we start, maybe actually, you know what? You're right. This is the pattern I've seen. bottom up, the application architects are realizing this problem, right? And then they start bypassing that ESP and that gateway layer. And the more people start bypassing that ESP and gateway layer, the more it becomes a CIO problem, because they go, why are people not doing this, right? And this is how we usually get pulled in. It's okay, well, now we need to solve, because the grassroots is not following the patterns, right?
So that's interesting. So Kong is making a space for itself by actually not actually quote unquote competing with those. It's actually saying, yeah, you've got that service bus, you've got that API gateway. It may be ours, it may be another one, but this we can fit in because you got Kubernetes. You're trying to plan Kubernetes. Yes, okay, there you go. That's interesting.
Right. Decentralization, right? How do you decentralize the whole thing while still having some level of controlling the chaos at the same time? That's the key nowadays, because it's inevitable that decentralization is happening.
Yeah. And I can't harp enough on the education of all of this needs to continue to happen, because I literally was in a conversation last week with a senior executive CTO of a bank, big bank, and they're still talking about cloud strategy. They're still talking about lifting and shifting. So they're not even there. And this is a modern bank. I mean, yeah, and there's many like this. So it's going to be, marketing, I think, is going to be huge in all of this. What do you think?
Yeah. Education, marketing, evangelizing. Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
I used to think that modernization was a one-time thing when I started my career. I really did. I'm like, okay, everyone's modernizing now and we're done after that. But no, it's going to always modernize even after you and I have retired, right?
Yeah.